Matt Lacefield. I'll be your IHT instructor for this next 15 minutes-ish. Anybody on a waiver? No? If you're going to need to evacuate, we're going to go this direction out the door, okay? All right, who has ever put a comment into EBMT? Raise your hand. Oh, great, put your hands down. Now that I have your attention. The reason this is important to you is because we are responsible for ensuring that we annotate the comments into EBMT appropriately, because it goes beyond the daily actions of the trainee, and we use this as an official record to identify how the trainee is progressing through training, so that in the event that we need to take any administrative actions later, the individuals that actually have the authority to make those decisions have the information in black and white to substantiate the decision they're making. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think so. That's why today we're going to talk about inputting comments into EBMT. We're going to look at the OI guidance, some of the requirements, when to use it, some of our squadron guidance or squadronisms, which is specifically important to you, and then we'll throw up one example and kind of walk through how to take a bad comment into a good comment, and then some techniques that maybe some of the younger instructors can use. Slide. All this is to meet the objective of participate in basic military training instructor, EBMT familiarization. What does this mean to you? That after you know how to do this, no more excuses. Can't say I didn't know, right? Same as always. All right, so the first thing that we need to understand is that there is some guidance that rules what we're going to do. And it is 36.3. Most of what you're going to see up here is straight out of 36.3. Now, I had to paraphrase a little bit of it just to get it to fit on the slide, but if you open it up, you can actually read it verbatim. The MTI counsels the trainee in the presence of a witness and documents the counseling. Now, the unique thing about the witness, I'm going to see this in a minute, is there are, in 36.3, it says that there are various types of witnesses. Now, we want to use the trainee witness system. Okay, so they're going to come in with a wingman. You can do their last four, you can pull them up, and they can be their witness. But in 36.3, it says there are different individuals that can do it. When documenting training sessions, be specific about the facts and recommendations. Write clearly. Number one, keep comments concise. They need to be very understandable. Do not make any unnecessary comments, over the top exaggerations, which I'm sure that we don't do, right? We don't think everything's the end of the world, or sarcastic remarks. To be effective, counseling must be specific, constructive, and timely. So, if you have a comment to write, say you're the morning instructor, you don't have time because between PT and Chow and getting them over to Med Dental or whatever the case is, it is still your responsibility to make sure that the comment is at least written. Pass it on to your evening instructor so that they can actually input it at EBMT. That's how you're going to have an effective team or an effective team. If your late instructor can't get it done because of whatever circumstances, then first thing in the morning, you should have some sort of changeover. You know you need to get that in there. It will be less effective if you wait over 48 hours. It's really less effective if you wait more than 24 hours to input this, because a lot of things have happened in the trainee's life since then. So they're not going to understand the correlation between personal accountability and progressive training. Slide. All right, some of the requirements when you're doing your comment. Obviously, you see that there are 4 requirements. Now, up top it talks about why we do it. Discipline is the number one reason why, so they can understand what it's like to adapt to military lifestyle. You must identify the deficiency, what the trainee did wrong. Be very specific about what they did wrong. Don't just say trainee lost bearing. Well, how? All right, be specific. Trainee lost their military bearing by rolling their eyes, or not moving to position, or moving in position of attention, or something to that effect. Be very specific. Reason for the deficiency. This is where we lose it sometimes. I don't know. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. These are some of the reasons that you see in comments. I have no excuse. All that is unacceptable. This is where we really need to ask the questions. And then the easiest one to ask is why? Why? Just continue to ask them. Eventually, they will come up with the root cause on their own. You just have to continue to ask the question. Don't accept I have no excuse. Training. Why did you roll your eyes at me? Sir, I don't know. No, that's not good enough. I don't accept excuses. Why did you roll your eyes at me? Because I was upset. Well, Why did you think it's okay to roll your eyes at another individual when you're upset? Because that's the way I grew up. Well, that doesn't make sense to me because it's unprofessional. Explain to me why. Explain to me why. And that's what you should be annotating in there. Really get down to the reason why, because that helps them self-identify what the problem is. All right? You can say something to your blue in the face. If they don't absorb that information, they're never going to fix what's going on. So use this as an opportunity to actually figure out what led to the deficiency. Identify a resolution. All right, this is where, what are we going to do to make this better? All right, in the 321st, and we're going to talk about this later, a resolution is not write an essay. That's ineffective because it could be 500 words of just blah, 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 and you don't know that they've grasped anything. So you need to find some sort of training objective that is going to remedy or resolve the deficiency. Right, and fix that root cause. That's why it's important to bear down on the root cause. If you have a trainee, say that doesn't tend to read the board on EC, and you figured out the root causes because they're trying to memorize it, well, now you're going to find a training resolution, and the training resolution could be something to the effect of review the steps and then brief the flight at evening roll call, step by step of how you do it, using the EC binder, not memorizing it. So it forces them to do X, Y, and Z. Or if it's fire gas bomb drills and they have a checklist, it's just something that maintains a training objective. 1x3s is another example, say you had a PT failure. And then finally, the disposition. Are they going to remain with the flight? Trainees in the second week of training will remain at the flight this time. Training has received 2 unsatisfactory core value ratings and is being referred to the instructor supervisor or flight commander. That's a disposition or further disposition. So this is where you got to figure out, what are you doing? Is it going past the MTI on the line and down to supervision, or is it staying with you and they're staying with the flight? Maybe there's a lateral movement. There's all kinds of things you can put there. But it must contain those 4 components to be an effective comment. Any questions on that? Slide. Some of the requirements: must sign the comment at the conclusion, and they must have a witness. So the individual, the MTI, and the witness must be there. This is where it talks about the witness. It says that be present another staff member, a student leader, or a trainee. So we don't ever use other staff members. That is in 36.3 that it could be done, but we always use another trainee as a witness. The individual initials as a witness, counseling session. MTI will include the staff member's name, rank. We pretty much got that because EBMT kind of makes us do this stuff. Trainees refer to supervisory personnel or counsel no later than the next day. So if you have somebody that has one of those things where they've got multiple core value ratings, or they've done something so egregious that it needs immediate meets IS, flight commander, DO intervention, next day is it. After that, if you've kind of just drug your feet, and it's back on you. And so the individual that's really personally accountable is the MTI, because that's our job to make sure that these individuals are getting the counseling they need in a timely manner, or else it becomes less effective. Slide. When to use it. So inside 36.3, you see this chart. The chart kind of gives you an idea of what MTIs on the line are capable of doing on their own, what the flight commanders needs to be referred up to flight commanders for additional comments. So you can see on the top one, the MTI for a first EOC, they'll write a comment, and then it'll refer it down to the IS flight commanders, and they can do a comment. It can go to the DO. PT is another one where you're going to do something for a PT, the fellow can meet this, and then it can go to the IS flight commander later, more for the final PTs. They failed to do X, Y, and Z. Rights in EBMT are a little sketchy sometimes, so if you ever run into any problems with rights and you can't get a comment to save, then just get with your IS or your flight commander or even the training superintendent, and we can shoot that up to the scheduling office and make sure that your profile is updated to allow you to get the rights to sign certain things, especially if you're moving through IS courses and training courses and stuff of that nature, the way you can get it done. Questions on that? All right, some of our individual 321st training guidance. Now, I'm sure you all saw an email recently from Colonel Ruiz Perez talking about adding the date to the beginning. Now, the reason why we're going to add the date to the beginning is because on the 205s, when we have trainees that are coming from the TRIS, okay, over to us, we don't always know how long they've been there or where they came from before they went to the TRIS, all right? So adding the date gives us a general timeline, all right? There's a date beside the 205 or beside the comment, but sometimes those dates don't correlate with when they actually got there because you don't know when the comment was actually input in relation to when the trainee made the transition. So we're going to add the date, and then we're going to put the 321st Training Squadron flight blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of trainees that come to us, and it just says trainee transfer due to medical form 154. We don't know where they came from. We don't know when they left, nothing. So this is to help alleviate that problem. It can help us, but it can also help all of the teammates that we have throughout BMT, and hopefully this format can be adapted into 36.3 and then it'll become a standard. But we're going to try to lead the way on this one. So an example would be like on 13 July 2020, 321st Training Squadron Flight 123, training XYZ is being counseled for, blah, 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 blah. Then we get into those 4 individual components. Another thing that is a 321st ISM, no essays or writing assignments are going to be part of your resolution. So no more training will write a 500-word essay on security drawer or write a 2-page writing assignment, or they will copy chapter 13 or whatever it is. None of that. We need to have an actual training objective, right? Something that they can do to fix the root cause. So you have to be creative, obviously. Bounce ideas off each other. If it gets to the point where you're wondering if it gets to maltraining, maltreatment, come to your instructor supervisor, come to your flight commander, come to somebody that's been on the line for a while. Ask them, because the last thing you want to do is get yourself in trouble. MTIs, flight commanders, ISs, you do not have the authority to recycle. Only the commander has that. So inside your comments, we should never see anything like trainee is going to be recycled 2 weeks. You can say something like sending trainee to flight commander except with request to, because we're allowed to request it, but we cannot put in there that trainee will be recycled. Trainee will lose, time for something. We don't have that authority. So it's always only the commander. Questions? I know we've all heard this kind of before. It's good to kind of refresh it though. Slide. Okay, example. So if you had this comment, it said 321st Training Squadron, Flight 123, counsel trainee so-and-so for failing to maintain his bearing while working as entry controller. More specifically, failing to comply with the written instructions for an entry controller and allowing an unauthorized entry. When questioned, trainee stated, "Sir, I have no excuse. The actions of this training demonstrate a complete lack of Air Force core values, service for self, specifically rule following, and excellence in all we do, specifically personal excellence. All trainees were briefed on expectations of military bearing and professionalism. Trainee will write a 500-word essay on the purpose of controlling entry into the military. Trainee is in the second week of training and will remain up the flight at this time." That's a long comment, right? And it's fairly well, written pretty well. Grammatically it seems pretty correct. But what is wrong with a comment like this?
No date.
No date.
Okay, no date. Yep.
It doesn't mention any actual loss of bearing. It says that he failed his
Right.
procedure, but did he stand his feet for a little temper
It
tantrum?
doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
You're trying to identify something. It doesn't correlate.
And the corrective action.
Corrective action. Yep.
Training status.
No root cause.
No root cause, yeah. All right, so slide. I think everything you said is pretty much right. There's no date in the beginning. Good job for making the correlation between the bearing and what he actually did, because while it sounds good, it doesn't, when you really look at it, it doesn't make any sense. We don't accept excuses. We need to get down to that root cause. We don't use a writing assignment, okay, as a form of resolution. Now, remember a couple slides ago it says excessive or over-exaggerated, right, pieces. That's why I did this in green. What we're saying here is that the trainee is failing to meet all these core values. That has nothing to do with what the trainee did wrong with.
Not a core value rating.
All right? So, while I don't personally believe that it's excessive to write that, because it's also part of a training objective. Hey, you did this, your deficiency was this. Here's your resolution and your root cause. How it relates to the BMT and the military is like this. But that doesn't fall under one of those 4 categories. So you have to be careful when adding that type of information in there, because it can start to get excessive. It can start to be very exaggerated, because now you're telling them that everything in the world was wrong because they didn't do something. So just be careful with that. I personally like to tie stuff into core values at times, but again, just be cognizant of the fact that it doesn't need to be too lengthy. Slide. All right, a way to rewrite it then would be on 16 July 2020, 321st Training Squad, Flight 123, trainee so-and-so is being counseled for failing to maintain his bearing while working as entry controller, more specifically, failing to use his reporting statement, moving at the position attention, and using vulgar language after being questioned about allowing an unauthorized entry. So you can see how it kind of ties it together a little bit more now. Trainee stated, "Sir, I failed to follow the steps outlined in the BMTSG and on the board at the EC stand." So now you force the trainee basically through questioning, "Hey, I did this, I did this, I did this. The reason I didn't get this right is because I actually failed to follow the steps. I failed to read the steps. I tried to memorize it, basically." And you can paraphrase a little bit. You can write verbatim. It depends on how long they talk. Make sure you read it back to the trainee so that they agree with the way it's written. That's super important too. I also not utilizing my time properly on shift to study. So these actions, the actions of this training demonstrate a lack of the Air Force core values, service for self. We kind of talked about that. All trainees are briefed on expectations of military bearing and professionalism. Trainee so-and-so will be required to brief the flight during the evening briefing on the steps required to allow an authorized entry into the dorm and the importance, or I obviously misspelled that, of maintaining bearing while in conversation with another military member. So that is an actual tangible training objective that you can give them, which means that the trainee is now going to have to go back into those books, is going to have to read through the steps and then present it in front of the entire flight. These are the steps, and here's why we use them. Trainee is in the second week training remaining in flight this time. Any questions about that? Does anybody disagree with it? It's okay to disagree. All right, slide. Now, for individuals that really want to ensure that they hit all the components, maybe you're new on the line and you're still trying to work your way through it, it's not uncommon to see somebody say, deficiency, blah, blah, blah. Reason for deficiency, so-and-so, here's my resolution, here's my disposition. That's an example. That is not a requirement to do that. I want to make that explicitly clear. That is just an example. If you don't want to do that, don't do it. All right, but some individuals want to make sure that they hit all 4 components, and that's how they do it. Any questions on inputting comments? Try to keep it brief.
Are you sending this out to everybody?
Huh?
Are you sending this out to
I've got it under the instructor resources tab inside the SharePoint. So everybody can see it at any point in time. All right, slide. All right, no questions? All right.
Are we still recording?
All right, today we talked about some OI guidance, some of the requirements, when to use it, the squadronisms, and gave you a couple of examples. So hopefully you can take this back out to the line and do a good job writing these comments so that in the event that we have to administratively move on to some training, push them back to transfer a flight, to recycle, ELS, whatever the case is, the leadership has a solid foundation and support behind them when making those decisions. All this, slide, is to meet that objective, participate in basic military training instructor, EB